This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
What's going on, everybody? It is a Monday afternoon, the 14th day of May, 2018. Dan Graca, Keyshawn, Johsnson hanging out with you for the next couple of hours. In for the man, Stephen A. Smith here on ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN is the telephone number, 888-729-3776. As I say, good afternoon to my partner in crime here, Mr. Keyshawn Johsnson. What's up, Key? How you doing?
What's happening? I don't want to be a partner in a crime. No.
Well, no crime. Nobody wants to commit a crime. Let's be honest.
That's the wrong thing for me to be a partner in a crime.
Anybody, not just you, me too. How's everything? You doing good?
Good. Just finished up 3 hours of radio here on the West Coast and filling in for Stephen A., as you mentioned, and ready to get going for the next 2 hours to make some great radio. Not that Stephen A. does not do it at this hour.
He sets the level high. He sets the bar very high, and we got to get to it, and we'll do that, of course. And before we get into all these things that are happening today, I want you to know that Weston knows how disruptive travel can be to your well-being, but with rejuvenating heavenly beds, a nutritious superfoods RX menu, and gear lending for when you leave your workout gear at home, Weston will help you stay in control and rise above it all. Weston, let's rise. Learn more at Weston.com. It's time for Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless. Best phones, best networks, no contracts. And Key, we thought we'd be starting off today talking about Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals, which we will do plenty of course, with the Celtics getting an emphatic Game 1 victory over the Cleveland Cavaliers. But earlier this morning, we got some news that it looks like we have now moved a big, giant step closer to the legalization of sports betting here in this country of ours. Can't say that we didn't see this one coming, but we are certainly moving closer to it now.
Anytime there's too much money involved in anything, they're going to legalize it. I mean, you just think about it from any standpoint. You can think about the marijuana issues. You think about alcohol back in the day. I mean, if there's money being made, they're going to figure out how to get it done. Some people are going to always fight against it, but others will eventually figure out how to make it work. The NFL, on the other hand, has not signed on, as you know, Dan, but eventually my prediction is that they will sign on the moment that they feel like, along with the NC2A, that they can benefit from it without disrupting the game or causing some sort of confusion with the sponsors and lots of dollars flying. They'll sign on for it for sure.
Absolutely. And earlier today, the NBA, Major League Baseball issued some statements. They were the first ones to kind of respond to it. And the NBA and Adam Silver, remember, had gone on the record in the past as saying that this is something that was an eventuality, and the NBA was certainly bracing itself for this. However, moments ago, Key, the NFL has weighed in. And look, when the NFL speaks, you know this, you played, but the NFL in 2018 is still the golden goose when you're talking about professional sports in this country. So let me real quick read you this statement from the NFL. The NFL's longstanding and unwavering commitment to protecting the integrity of our game remains absolute. Congress has long recognized the potential harms posed by sports betting to the integrity of sporting contests and the public confidence in these events. Given that history, we intend to call on Congress again, this time to enact a core regulatory framework for legalized sports betting. We also will work closely with our clubs to ensure that any state efforts that move forward in the meantime protect our fans and the integrity of the game. That is the big line there, that last statement, the integrity of the game. That is something that the NFL certainly is fearful of.
Today, that is the case. Tomorrow, it may be something different because, as you know, you got these owners, wealthy owners. Yes, they got several billion, but they would like to also gain several more billions of dollars. And the way that they can do it is through participating in the online or on the gaming, whether it's online or in the stadiums or whether it's at the kiosks inside stadiums. They're putting an NFL team in Vegas, for crying out loud. There's already an NHL team. Eventually, I predict there'll be an NBA team in Las Vegas. It's just a stepping stone in the right direction. Nothing moves fast. Everything takes its time because owners like Jerry Jones, owners like Robert Kraft, they'll all sit back and realize we're missing out on something. And if we're going to miss out on it, then they're not going to want to be a part of being in the NFL. Although they do make billions of dollars, why not try to continue to make more money on top of that?
Well, the funny thing about it, too, is, and as you said, you know, these leagues are going to certainly perk up when you see something like this. And as you mentioned today, it might be something that they're worried about in terms of preserving the integrity of the game. But if there's also going to be a financial gain that is to be had, that is when they all want to have their hands in the cookie jar. And I think that you've seen that. And look, the government is no different. Why do you think the regulation is in place here? Because the government's saying, well, wait, if there's going to be sports betting, we want to be also to benefit it as well. And I think you're going to see that trickle down effect when you talk about these respective sports, because I'm not trying to advocate anything here, but you know, Key, and I know, and everybody knows that people are gambling on the NFL. Regardless. Whether it's legal or not. It's been going on forever, and it will still continue to go on.
Yes, and on top of that, when you think about it, though, Dan, the NFL is about money. It's all about the bottom line. Eventually, they'll get to understand it's not going to kill off your sponsors. The sponsors will then say, if we can advertise on the gaming sites, we can make money. So let's allow the NFL to do it. Let's not frown up on it. Then when you start getting these, the Facebooks of the world, the YouTubes, whatever the social media cycle is, that now gets involved. Now that's more money. And eventually at the end of the day, they'll sign off on it. I guarantee you they'll sign off at the end of the day. When that will be, I don't know. Maybe we won't be around to see it, but eventually it will find its way through the NFL.
I mean, don't you think, and this has been a discussion that's been going on now for a while as well, when you talk about rotisserie sports and fantasy, what is fantasy sports in this regard? Isn't that almost the same type of thing? Absolutely. You're playing for money.
Yes. It's playing for money. It's like playing a game of horse for money. It's the same thing.
And the league sponsors some of these fantasy organizations as well.
And the league has sponsored some of the organizations in the past as well. But I think what has happened here is when you go back and you look in history, they've always frowned upon it because things have happened, whether it was the referees in the NBA, whether it was many years ago, with Art Schlichter or some of the things that have gone on with ASU's basketball program and the NC2A several years ago, point shaving, all of those sort of things have to get worked out before you can come to some realization that this is good for our game. This is good for the integrity of our game. We don't have to worry about it. Just think about it for a minute from the Raiders standpoint, just the Raiders alone being in Vegas. If the Raiders had kiosks inside their stadium or somewhere next to the stadium, adjacent to the stadium, whatever you want to call it, and somebody decided to go to the game, but while they're going to the game, they're going to place a bet during halftime of the second half right there at the stadium. You don't think that the Raiders would sign off on that?
Well, what about why not just the Raiders? I mean, because the tipping point in this particular story was involved in the state of New Jersey. You began your career playing in the state of New Jersey. So let's just say you go to a game at MetLife Stadium now, either Giants, Jets. Same thing could apply there, could it not?
Same thing at the Giants and the Jets. I think, and I keep forgetting that you have the boardwalk in New Jersey and there's
Atlantic City.
There's the gambling there. I keep forgetting that because every time I think of gaming, I always bring my mind to the West Coast and Vegas because obviously it's the big enchilada, in terms of gambling. But even in New Jersey, you have professional teams. You got the 76ers that were just in the playoffs right there. You got the Eagles who just won the Super Bowl. You also got the Giants and the Jets, like you said. So you got all that right there. Why not try and take advantage of it? As long as it doesn't hurt the game and players aren't doing things. But I wouldn't just worry about players. You got to worry about the players. You got to worry about ownership. You got to worry about referees. So there's a lot that they have to kind of sort out before they can determine whether or not it's good for the league.
And the other thing, too, you said it earlier. You mentioned Las Vegas. Okay, why was professional sports so reluctant for so many years to put a franchise in the Sin City? Well, because of the gambling ties, right? And we had the dam broken already with the hockey team in Vegas. Yeah. The Raiders are now on the way to moving there. And what's going to stop them? As you said, maybe the NBA comes calling when you talk about Vegas. This is just going to be the beginning, and I think that you're going to see it suddenly become more of a professional sports hotbed when something like this takes place.
I think when you look at it, think about it 20 years ago, right, when this kind of started taking – conversations. Oh, Vegas needs a professional team. Maybe the Rams, maybe the Raiders, all these teams start thinking about that. But the league, the NFL in particular, was afraid of not only the gambling, the high rate of, just illegal activity in general that go along in Vegas. But you can go to every single city. There's casinos in every single city now.
Right.
So you can get past that. There's strip clubs in every single city. You can get past that now. Now they looking at Vegas and they go, well, if it's happening in Miami and it's happening in New Jersey and it's happening in Milwaukee and all these other places, well, why can't we just do it in Vegas? And I think that'll be the same way as you start to get to the different states that will rule on this in favor of gambling in those states, you'll start to see the NFL say, well, they got all this other stuff that's supposed to be a black eye. Now they got the gambling. We're missing out on something.
Right.
We're missing. You get the 32 owners together, and there's going to be a few owners that say, well, wait a minute. Yeah, we got a few billion, but this other guy, he's sitting on 30 billion. We're trying to get to that level. In order for us to get to that level, we need to benefit on some of this money that we're not touching.
Well, aren't there some owners, Robert Kraft is one off the top of my head, aren't some of these owners directly having ties to some of these fantasy sports organizations?
I think there's a number, but the league is part of the owners.
Right.
So it's all kind of intertwined together. They approve it, the league takes it and does it, but the owners are approving it, and it's their financial gain as an ownership group of all 32 that benefits off of it. It's just not Robert Kraft who's benefiting. Robert Kraft may have brought it to the table, discussed it. Because of him signing off on it, the rest of the owners went ahead and said, okay, we'll sign off on it and we'll pay money for them to advertise, or they'll pay us money to be able to advertise, and we'll accept it.
888-SAY-ESPN's the number, 888-729-3776. We want to get to the NBA here in just a second, but one last thing to wrap up. And if you have calls on this, certainly we'll take them over the course of the next couple of hours. Let me ask you this, though. What happens if this type of a ruling came down while you were still an active player in the NFL? Would you have any greater concerns that maybe the integrity of the game is going to be compromised in any way, shape, or form?
No, because I don't believe that in this situation that you can, I guess the integrity of the game would be point shaving or cheating or dropping balls or things of that nature. I've never felt that way about any of my teammates, even though gambling was already out there, illegal or legal. Gambling's been around since I've been alive. I've been alive 45 years.
Sure.
And I've never felt that any of my players was doing anything that they shouldn't have been doing. So I wouldn't feel that way. If it was legal, I'd just be like, it's legal. Damn dude dropped the ball. He missed a field goal. What does that have to do with anything?
Well, now, the other thing you have to also bring, I mean, look, the NBA has had some problem with this in the past, right? With the Tim Donaghy thing. When you talk about some of these officials, now when you have this, is there any greater concern for maybe the people whose job it is to regulate some of these games, the officials, the refs, that maybe they're going to be a little bit more wide-eyed in this case? But
I would think, Dan, that because the regulations and legally, and you could kind of, I mean, I'm not a gambler, but you could see, I'm sure, who's placing what bets and what the bets look like. All of a sudden there's somebody laying a bet on a game for $4.5 million that's never done that before. Right. It's got to be some eyebrows being raised and some red flags being put up when those sort of things happen. The little smaller dollar amounts, you kind of probably sit there and go, well, why, at least me, and maybe I'm stupid, dumb, and blind, I don't know, but small dollar amounts is not worth an NFL player risking his career, giving the amount of money that's being given to the athlete now today. It's not worth that risk.
No, not compared to the financial gain that you could have from just going out there and having a professional playing career.
Exactly. Unless you all of a sudden, like I said, you look up and there's a $5 million bet placed on something out of nowhere when that particular person has never betted that way before.
Mm-hmm. And look, as you said, you have to be completely 100% naive to think that people don't gamble on sports. Okay? We know, look, we've all done, you play fantasy, you're gambling, as we said. People make bets here, and we know everybody who's done this along the lines. I just don't think that substantially it's going to make that great a difference when you're talking about the day in and day out, at least when we talk about professional sports and the way that we go about viewing it. I just don't.
In NC2A, not to get away from the NFL, the NC2A they got to figure this out too. They got to figure out what they want to do and how they want to approach it, because does it mean that now all of a sudden that the athlete benefits because you're being paid to advertise and you're making money off this? Now does the student athlete benefit on getting his stipend raised so he doesn't have to go out there and do the extracurricular activities where now all of a sudden there's an FBI probe and agents and all that sort of stuff? Do they benefit off of it as well? Can't forget about them.
You fill out a bracket, and if you get in an office pool and there's money involved, isn't that gambling? That's gambling, right? So, the players in these schools, they don't see any of that. And maybe not necessarily that they should, but I think that there's also been gambling when it pertains to college sports as well. College football, college you name it. It's almost from the beginning of time, Key, right? If there is a game to be played, at least in our society, people are going to wager on it. Because
there's no question.
It ups the ante. And I'm saying everybody. I'm not saying this is for everybody, but you have to be foolish to think that this stuff does not go on and has been going on for quite some time.
Look, I'm not a gambler on sports like that at all. I don't think I've ever placed a bet a day in my life on a sporting event. Mm-hmm. But I could just be walking down the street coming from the studios, and somebody could walk up to me and say, today, man, what you think? You think I ought to take the points on the Golden State Warriors? You think I ought to, what do you think, man? You know? And I'm like, I can't really help you because I really don't know much about gambling, but at the end of the day, that's the sort of stuff you still get.
Right. No, you're absolutely right about that. And, this will be interesting. Now, this maybe isn't my concern, maybe isn't your concern, but we talked about Vegas, and now all of a sudden how they become maybe more of an appealing destination for a professional sports franchise, even in addition to the ones that they have already or soon to be had. What about the appeal of Las Vegas in general? Maybe not. It's not that pertinent of a discussion for what we're talking about here, but now does the appeal of Las Vegas maybe get diminished to a certain degree if this type of stuff and legalized sports gambling is going to be available in other states so you don't have to trek all the way out to Vegas?
No, there's nothing like anything in person. You know that.
Right.
Right? I mean, there's just nothing like sitting in the sports books, sitting there, listening to all the ding, 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 ding all over the place, and the alcohol and the cigarette smoke as you walk through the casinos. There's nothing like that for someone who's a gambler. There's just being there, being live at the venue is all part of the experience, I would think, because I certainly rather be at the NBA final than watching it at home. I certainly would rather be at the Rose Bowl watching the Trojans instead of watching it on television if given the opportunity.
Here's something from Tony Clark. He is the executive director of the Major League Baseball Players Association on the ruling. The court's decision is monumental, with far-reaching implications for baseball players and the game we love. From complex intellectual property questions to the most basic issues of player safety, the realities of widespread sports betting must be addressed urgently and thoughtfully to avoid putting our sports integrity at risk as states proceed with legalization. There's that word again, integrity. And still, I think that more than anything else is going to be at the forefront of any argument that any of these sports or any of these players association, for example, are going to address. They want to make sure that the game itself, the essence of why we watch sports, the essence of why we play sports, to have a winner or a loser is not going to be compromised.
And they should. They have to scrub it clean to make sure, put things in place to protect the integrity of the game, because certainly as a fan of someone who's spending money as a season ticket holder or whatever the case may be, or even a guy who's betting, you want to be fair. You want to make sure that everybody's playing on an even field, playing ground. There's no extracurricular funky business going on. So I certainly understand why the use of integrity. You want to put that out there, integrity, so that at the end of the day, they cover their own butts.
But see, here's the other thing, and you know that green is the color that makes the world go round. Okay, we all know this. Now, if the NBA, for example, who they have been out and ahead of all these other sports when addressing this issue, because Adam Silver spoke out about it a while back, you could talk about integrity, but at what level do you put the price on integrity if there is going to be financial gain that's going to be able to had, and in this case, benefiting from the legalized sports betting? You know what I'm saying? So, okay, we want a fair game, but if there's a chance for us to maybe benefit financially and to increase our bottom line, that is going to trump anything else, integrity included.
I think at the same time, though, the NBA has vetted the process and understand exactly what it is that they needed to do to dive in bed with gambling and sports betting. They certainly have already done that. Like you said, they've already kind of sorted in a number of issues, whether it's social issues or whether it's this that we're talking about right now. They're out in front. They remember they put the NBA All-Star game in Vegas.
Right.
Okay, so they've been out in front in the sports world of doing things differently than the norm. And so because of that, you got to tip your hat off to what the NBA has decided to do in this situation.
Yeah, and the other thing, too, that'll be interesting, because when you talk about NBA, right behind that, as we said, is probably Major League Baseball. At least if you kind of read the tea leaves here. Remember, they've spoken out about it. But they do also keep an eye on making sure the game is fair. Now, Tony Clark also said in that statement about player safety. For those that maybe aren't aware, for example, player safety, to what degree? Do they think somebody's going to come and, pull a Tanya Harding or something and whack one of these guys as they're walking out on the field if they're out and about because they got a wager placed on the game?
Well, you always can think that way, but that would happen now anyway because there's wagers being placed on the games illegally. So if that was the case, then you probably would already have that happening. But it certainly increases awareness because of this. I mean, weird things happen. But people have been betting on games with athletes on the field all the time. I'm sure when I played for the New York Jets, there was bets placed on my head that I would catch a ball or drop a ball or score the final touchdown or not.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So just do I get kidnapped on my way to the stadium because there's a bet placed? I mean, you can't think like that when you're an athlete on the field or the court or the diamond. It's just not something that you worry about. You don't worry about, if I hit this home run, that somebody's betting that we lose, and all of a sudden I'm going to hit a home run. I can't do this.
Straight Talk Wireless, nationwide coverage on America's largest and most dependable 4G LTE networks. We're going to get into the NBA playoffs as well. Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals in the books, and to say that it was a laugher would be an understatement as the Boston Celtics continue their dominance on their home court and maybe give LeBron James and company something to think about. We will get into that next. Dan Graca and Keyshawn Johnsson in for Stephen A. Smith. We talk NBA on ESPN Radio.
Washing my nose, oh yeah.
I'm a shower curtain, and I do one thing, keep water from leaking everywhere. So you see why I feel useless compared to Geico, who does so much more. Like, not only could Geico save you money, but they've been around for over 75 years. And they give you 24/7 access online, over the phone, or on the Geico app. And they've got a 97% customer satisfaction rating. They do all this while I have to listen to this chucklehead. Oh, good, he stopped.
Washing my toes.
Oh, great, an encore.
Geico. Expect great savings and a whole lot more. You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca, Keyshawn Johnsson hanging out for Stephen A. till 3 o'clock Eastern Time here on ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN is the telephone number, 888-729-3776. And the 2018 NFL schedule has been out for a few weeks now, and the time is now to jump on tickets. Vivid Seats has you covered. Download the free Vivid Seats app today to get your 2018 NFL tickets. Vivid Seats, the official ticket partner of ESPN. By the way, the opening segment was brought to you by Credit Karma. Get your truly free credit scores and free credit monitoring from Credit Karma today. Credit Karma, get knowing. If you want to tweet at us, you can get Keyshawn, of course, at Keyshawn, me at Dan Graca, Graca. We'll get to some NBA as well. Game 1, Celtics, a trouncing of the Cleveland Cavaliers. Key, let's get to some calls, though. A lot of people want to weigh in. Let's start with Dante in California. Dante, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you guys?
Good, Dante.
What's happening?
So I think with the gambling thing, I think it's a good thing for the overwhelming most part because I feel like it's a victimless crime, for the most part. And I think that the revenue is going to be great. When you look at how the legalization of recreational marijuana use in states like Colorado and California, here in California and Washington, how many millions and millions of dollars they got off the taxable revenue just in the first couple of months, I think it's a great thing. And I think that the NFL owner or any major sports league owners would be kind of foolish to look that money away and say, we don't want to be a part of that. I think it's long overdue, and that is something that's going to just bring a whole lot more interest to the game. Like you guys were talking about earlier this morning, a lot more casual fans are going to have that more vested interest in these games now because of it.
I don't necessarily see, Key. I don't know if when you say it's going to make a tremendous increase when you're talking about the interest in the so-called casual fan is now going to be so much more on board when you're talking about sports because now legally you can go out and place a wager. I think that the people that are doing it already are going to continue to do it, maybe with less repercussions because you have the legal aspect to it now. But to say that it's going to make this quantum leap, I don't necessarily go there because after all, these are like golden gooses to begin with. They produce a ton of revenue as is these sports. How is this going to make it that much more significant when you're talking about at least from a fan standpoint?
Well, I think you got to look at it from sort of kind of like the fantasy football, fantasy sports, where all of a sudden the casual fan is dialed in and he's playing fantasy football, so he's paying more attention to the games now because he wants to see exactly how the individual player is performing. That way he knows how his fantasy team is performing. So he's not only watching the stat line, but he's also watching the game. And I think to a point where the casual fan who's just kind of, it's on, his background noise, they'll start to zoom in and watch a little bit more because there's money being placed on it now.
Like the guys just told me that Mark Cuban, for example, told CNBC he thinks the value of franchises of the 4 major sports are going to double as a result of the legalized betting. I think that is a very, very, maybe overly optimistic way of looking at it. I don't think so you're telling me that if a franchise worth $1 billion is all of a sudden going to be worth $2 billion just because of this legislation? I just don't see that.
At some point, we don't know what's all in the deal. Right? We don't know what's all in the deal. We don't know what was structured, how it's structured, what they can gain from it, what sponsorships down. Because think about it, Dan. When a team is good, the team itself makes a lot of money because people spend money on advertising. Now all of a sudden you got this league that's involved in it, who's approving it, who wants to be a part of it. Now you have, I was saying earlier, you have all these sponsorships, all these corporate companies that all of a sudden is saying, well, if it's good enough for the NBA, is good enough for us because the same consumers that's dealing with the NBA is dealing with us. Let's get in bed with them. So now all of a sudden those particular franchises are making more money. Therefore, it will add value to the team. Not necessarily double it or triple it or whatever, but it will certainly add value to those franchises.
It'll add value, sure. But again, like I said, that's very optimistic to say that you're going to make that type of a leap. And look, it might not even be in our lifetimes if it continues like this, and we could be long gone when you're talking about that type of an effect having on these particular franchises.
I'm trying to live till I get to 200, so I don't know what
to 200. You drinking the body armor? You're doing all this stuff that our sponsors. You got to take care of yourself, Key. Got to take care of yourself. Jacob in Tennessee. Jacob, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
How you do today? Good, sir. How you do today?
Good, Jake. What's going on?
Hey, not much, man. I'm not going to take long. I just wanted to say that I personally believe that the betting thing, there's not really big. I personally believe there's a big deal there because I've personally put up bets myself on teams, and I don't see. I think it could do some good in certain ways with the owners making more money, but that's really my take on it. Thank you for the time.
Jacob, thanks for the call. But Key, let me ask you a question. Do you think that Joe Public out there, just your average fan, do you think he really cares about the owner of his team or any other team out there making more money? I think that the fans are probably thinking these guys have way too much money as it is. I don't think that they're up late at night wondering if they're going to make even more.
No, they could care less about what the owners are going to make. Really, they can. They just they care about what they're making. On these bets, that's what they'll care about. They don't care what the owner makes. I think they're going to look at it from a return. And here's just how you should look at it if you're a fan. Look at it for, all right, what does it mean to me? For instance, if I have season tickets, my ticket price is going to go up, my ticket price is going to go down if the team is generating more revenue. Now, you could say, well, if we have more money coming in as an organization, maybe we can trim some fat into other areas, i.e. merchandising, ticket sales, on and on. But Key, you know this. Greed is a very popular thing. And if you could keep making more money and people are willing to spend it, it's the whole supply and demand, then they're going to not make any significant changes, and it's really not going to behoove the fan in any way. Well, owners don't buy teams to just sit around and not make money.
Exactly. It's a business venture.
That's what they do. They buy the teams so they can make money. No owner's buying a team and say, well, I paid $2 billion. You know what? I don't like it. I'm just going to sell it for $500 million. No, they're trying to sell it for $3.5 billion. That's what they want to do. They want to make money. And if they can make money, then they'll get involved. Period. That's the bottom line. No matter what sport it is, they're in the business of making money. Jerry Jones, all of the whole national anthem thing and all that, when you started to affect his bottom line,
that's it.
Then he started to say, no, you can't. We're not doing this anymore. I don't need any more sponsors calling me and saying, hey, our consumers don't like this. We may have to pull out. So that's when the owners step up and say, it's not that they against it or with it. They're against losing their money and they with making money.
Well, Key, let me ask you this one, too, and maybe this is another discussion for another day, but I think it's something that maybe bears watching whenever the particular collective bargaining agreements are up with these sports. And I don't have them right in front of me as to the drop dead dates on those. How do you think something like this could influence the tussle on that between the two sides?
It's certainly going to influence it.
A significant complication, though?
I don't know how significant, but the NFL is up in 2021, I believe that's the year. And the NFL may be sitting back, holding that card to the players in the NFLPA and saying, hey, we'll do this if you guys do this. I mean, it's just, you just never know. Same thing with the marijuana issue of legalizing marijuana. 2021, it comes up, it goes, hey, you do this, we may be able to do that. So they're going to always use things in their favor to try to get an edge.
Justin in Georgia. Oh, I'm sorry, Key. Justin, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Fine. How you guys doing?
What's up, Justin?
How you guys doing, man?
What's happening?
Wanted to say, man, that with the whole thing with the gambling and the betting and everything like that, the only way it really works is if you re-standardize everything. When you get the NFL Player Association involved, not only just the owners, the referees, everybody across the board from every sport has to understand the bottom line, and that way everybody could benefit. I think it's where social media and everything is kind of like revolutionized. This is the sports world kind of is catching up with that. And that's how I feel about the whole situation with the betting and everything. You already have the apps out there where people can do it. You got your fantasy teams already. Why not re-standardize it where everybody can benefit from it, where it's in the best interest of everybody to do the right thing? And then you have the NCAA where you have players. Why can't you just set up a trust or something like that where you do benefit off these players, but in the end, after the player finishes school, he can get whatever they have benefited off that player, the player can get that back from the school. I think that's fair. They're not that they can't get it while they're playing or while they're with the school. They have to be a NFL pick or whatever they're going to do in the later part of life, but they can no longer be a part of their school. Then they can get whatever the team got from that player. I think that's fair.
That's a plus and a minus. The plus side of it is that you're going to get something.
Right.
If it doesn't work out at the next level, you get an education, whatever the number is at the end of the day, $50,000, $100,000 in your account. Mm-hmm. But I need it right now.
Right.
I don't need it tomorrow.
Yeah, it's not a trust fund.
I need to be able to eat and live for the next 4 or 5 years while I'm in college. If, while I'm working on my degree, given the fact that I'm probably not going to make it to the next level. So I need it today. I'm not looking for it tomorrow. So it's a plus side of it there's something there at the end. Mm-hmm. But remember, I need it today.
Yeah.
And the fact that I need it today, how does it benefit me today?
Absolutely. And then there's a whole other complicated issue as to whether, whenever we get into this discussion of paying college players, it's okay, well, how much should you get and who? Because the football players, the basketball players, the revenue-generating athletes, yes, they should be entitled to something, but then what if you have other scholarship players or athletes at the school, whether it's golf, volleyball, swimming, tennis, who don't generate as much revenue? They're going to sit there and raise their hand and say, well, what about us? We fall under the same rules as you guys do as well. So very complicated discussion.
Whenever you're talking about rules, then.
No, for sure. And I've been advocating that for quite some time, for sure.
I get that the there's other sports there and the water polos and the golfs and all. I get it. But let's be real here. Who brings in the money? It's the basketball and the football program. So let's figure out, here's a pool for these other sports and here's the pool for the two majors. And that's what it is. And the two major sports give full rides. Mm-hmm. There's a handful of full rides on a baseball team. A couple on track. I'm talking very, very little in any other sport.
Of course. You're right about that.
So how am I going to think that Baker Mayfield is supposed to get the same amount of money as the guy who is throwing a shot put? I mean, come on, stop. Let's not fool ourselves.
The CBS or whatever these networks are, or when they dish out hundreds of millions of dollars to be able to have the NCAA tournament, for example, and the rights to that, they're not writing those kind of checks for instance, the swimming tournaments or the swimming nationals when you're talking about college. Unfortunately, that's the truth, and that's what makes the world go round. Unfortunately, we'll get more into this.
That's not the athlete's fault that the other person picked a bad sport to play.
It's not. It's not. And when they get into playing the sport at a young age, I'm sure that they're not thinking about, how is it going to behoove me, as opposed to other athletes if I get to play at the collegiate level if I'm a scholarship athlete. It doesn't. But we'll get to more of this coming up. We'll also do some NBA as promised. Dan Graca, Keyshawn Johnsson, in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776, the telephone number. Dan Graca and Keyshawn Johnsson in for Stephen A. We'll take you another hour plus here till 3 o'clock on the East Coast. Stephen A. Smith Show brought to you by Indeed, used by over 3 million businesses for hiring. Post a job today at Indeed.com/hire. And ESPN Radio is presented by Progressive Home Insurance. Getting a quote is easier than ever. You can tweet at him at Keyshawn, myself at Dan Graca, and we'll get to the Cavs and the Celtics coming up at the top of the hour as a very one-sided game number one in the Eastern Conference. And, of course, look ahead to tonight's tip-off of the Western Conference Finals between the Warriors and the Houston Rockets. We've been talking in great length in this first hour by the news that came down this morning that sports betting is now, for the most part, going to be legalized here in the near future across this great country of ours, and what are the ramifications as it pertains to each and every sport. And they've all been weighing in, Key, little by little here. And the last one to kind of break the dam was the NFL, who, made their public comments on it. But, at the end of the day, the common theme that all three of these sports, or when I say three, the ones that have spoken out, they worry about the integrity of the game. Bottom line.
Yeah, it is an integrity of the game, but it's so much money being made from the athlete standpoint, and I don't know what the referees make or the in-game clock managers, and I don't know about that part of it. But I know as far as the players go, they make a lot of money that I certainly, if I was one of them, wouldn't try to sacrifice or risk for a small amount of money that you're going to be paid to do something you shouldn't be doing.
Absolutely.
It just doesn't make any sense. I know you always get one or two or three in a sport that does something they shouldn't be doing, whether it was a referee in basketball or back in the day, I forgot which referees it was that was doing something with the airline tickets. And I understand there's always going to be a few, but I can't base all of that integrity stuff on a couple guys.
Well, that's the thing, though. But I think that that's going to be the first thing that jumps to people's minds whenever you talk about this now, because we have seen it, and we saw it fairly recently with the NBA, as you said. So I think that people are now going to keep a watchful eye over that stuff. And it's also not going to, I think, prohibit certain folks or make them more reluctant to go out there and place wagers if they were doing it already. But I think to make sure that these games are now going to be officiated properly, if you put this onto the table as well, is also something that bears watching.
And look, I think we're obviously it's hot news, it's breaking news over the last couple hours, and so we're going to have a conversation about it, and it'll be talked about for a while. It's something that I look at and I say to myself, look, if you're so worried about players, the safety of players, what could potentially happen, then go ahead and legalize it and let's see. Or go ahead and approve it and let's see. Let's take that chance.
Does what happened in Boston yesterday change your outlook for the Eastern Conference Finals? We'll talk about that, plus talk about Rockets-Warriors Game 1 tonight. Dan Graca and Keyshawn Johnsson in for Stephen A. Smith here on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app. This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
And hour number 2, Dan Graca, Keyshawn Johnsson in for Stephen A. We'll take another hour here on ESPN Radio, 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Key, we have a game under our belts in the conference finals, and it was a one-sided affair, to put it mildly. And I think if you're the Cavaliers, you wake up this morning and you say, geez, we're not in Kansas anymore, or in their case, not in Toronto anymore. They got a wake-up call on that one yesterday.
No, they did. I think when you think about it, I don't think that they expected for Boston to get out the way that they did. I mean, I don't think anybody expected for them to get out the way that they did. I mean,
Not like that.
There's a young team that's coached extremely well. But then on the flip side of things, you look at LeBron James and King James and his crew. You didn't expect for them to shoot the way that they shot, open looks and continuing to miss. There's no way you thought that, and you certainly didn't believe that they would get down the big 29-point deficit in the first half and then try to figure out how to close it out.
No, definitely not. And look, it's just one game, and in my opinion, it really doesn't do anything in terms of changing my thought process as to how I evaluate this series. I didn't think this was going to be a sweep for Cleveland. I picked Cleveland to win in 6. I didn't think they were just going to roll over this team. They're too darn good of a basketball team, the Boston Celtics. So, all right, they dropped the first one in Boston. Take the score out of it. It's still one loss. And in the NBA playoffs, I think that we have seen this time and time again. One game to the next, there's very little carryover effect. You can wipe the slate clean completely because when they step out on that floor for game number 2, what happened in game 1, I don't think that applies. It is a whole new ball game, and I think what would surprise me, Key, is if Cleveland does not come out in game number 2 and play a heck of a lot better than they did on Sunday.
Look, I think they'll come out and I think they will play better. But here's like what we always say in football. When we put on the film, we find the duck. You know, there's the pointer that the coach has on the film. He's looking for the duck. Who's the duck? Where's the duck? Oh, the duck is Kevin Love. He's the duck because when you let Al Horford go 7 for 8 and the only one that he misses is a long 3, now you're working with something. He brings Kevin Love out. Now he has to guard him one-on-one. That's a liability for Cleveland. Now, the second time around, what do? You're going to start Tristan Thompson in the second game? You've got to figure out an answer for Al Horford, and it sounds weird, but you certainly have to figure out how do you slow Horford down? How do you do that?
Well, I mean, and as you said, right, Cleveland likes to go with the small lineup so they can get shooters on the floor. I get all that. But then by doing so, as you said, you have Love at playing the 5, and it would then become imperative that if he is going to be the man in the middle and he's going to be your true big in that situation, then he's going to have to win that matchup with Al Horford. He didn't yesterday, not even close. And Horford, of course, huge for the Celtics when you're talking about what they like to do in terms of the pick and roll. And if you're Cleveland, if you're Ty Lue now, when you look at rolling the dice, how do I change things up for game number 2? You probably have to give it some serious consideration to bring in Tristan Thompson just for the sake of providing a little defense here. Celtics scored 108 points in the game yesterday, Key. 60 points in the paint. You need that rim protector here or else it's going to be a long day at the office again.
And you do have to make that adjustment. And I think when you look at from an offensive standpoint for Cleveland, LeBron James. LeBron didn't have his best game, but at some point in time, he's going to struggle. He can't be Superman night in and night out. This is when you need your other guys to step up, the Kevin Loves, the J.R. Smiths, the Clarksons. This is why you went out and you got these guys to step up to the plate, make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. But if I'm Boston, what I would do, and not necessarily double LeBron, I'll do some of the same things that I did in game 1. I'll single him up. When I need to shade to his side, I'll shade to him for backdoor help, whatever the case may be, to allow him to kick to the outside guys. If they start hitting, and I'm talking about hitting and knocking down the threes and the long jumpers, now all of a sudden I can make that particular adjustment back to try and slow them down to take the ball out of LeBron's hands. But in the beginning, I'm going to make LeBron give the ball up. I'm not going to allow him to just dominate. Even though he is the king, I can't allow him to just dominate, penetrating on the board, whether he's pushing it up the floor, whether he's driving and dishing. I'll let you do all of that, but I'm not going to let you outscore me. I'm just not going to do it.
Well, and here's the thing. Looking at this series, and it was the same thing even in the last round with Toronto, LeBron could go out there, and you know what, Key? If I'm the Celtics, I let him fill up the stat sheet. Let him go out there and get triple-doubles. Let him score 40 points and just have this phenomenal game. But you can't let these other guys end up beating you, because I think as far as Cleveland's going to go, I know that it sounds weird, but it's going to have to be the supporting cast that's going to enable them to continue playing on here in this postseason. You mentioned the laundry list. If those guys are not knocking down their shots, I'll give you an example. You look at some of these other guys, George Hill, Korver, JR, they were 6 of 19 yesterday for 14 points. That's not going to get it done. When this team has been their most successful, it's not just LeBron playing great, it's the other guys chipping in, because LeBron can't do it by himself.
Well, he actually can do it by himself.
But not to win a championship. Not to win a championship,
Not to win a championship. Maybe we haven't really seen him do that, but he can, to a degree, do it by himself. I don't want him to get off. I don't want him to get his buckets. What I want to do is force him to not take shots and get the ball to other people until they start knocking it down. Once they start to knock it down, then I'll worry about LeBron. And the reason is it's a reverse type situation. You say, well, why would you not want LeBron to just knock it down and keep those other guys? No, give the ball to them because they haven't been able to do it. He's been able to show you he can score 30. He can score 35. And when he's doing that, the winning percentages are high. So you take the ball out of his hands, force them to show you that they can do it. And if they can do it, then you deserve to win. You deserve to win. But I know you can win when the ball is in his hands. But I don't know that you can win when it's in their hands.
And I'll tell you, he doesn't mind giving it up. You know, and that was one of the things that for the large majority of his career, people have criticized him over that, right? Because so many times, right, he became the facilitator. And he talked about it after the game. You know, I don't mind making the smart basketball play, which he doesn't. And give him credit for that. He's not a selfish player in that aspect. But if you are going to give the ball up, and it might be the wise play, like if Kevin Love is in the corner and they're drawing a double team to LeBron and he's wide open, or you kick it out to anybody out there for a good look, then you got to knock it down. You know, you're down to the Final Four in the NBA. You're expected to make plays like that. And you don't have Kyrie anymore. And it's useless to sit here and pinpoint and to pick apart why these guys are traded and why the supporting cast is what it is and to place blame. That's irrelevant. Right now, though, okay, you're not going to make any roster changes. Kevin Love is on this team. He's getting paid $100 million or thereabout to act as the number 2 option on this team. He darn well better start playing like it, or else it's going to be a swift exit for this club.
Well, I think when you look at it, though, yes, he's being paid to be the number 2 guy, but he really, for the most part this year, he's been subpar. He hasn't been all that great, and it's been a lot of pressure on LeBron to be able to perform and keep this team in the Eastern Conference, or better yet, get him to the Eastern Conference final. But at the same time, Kevin Love, let's not put it all on Kevin Love. There's other guys that are on this team that needs to knock down shots as well, whether it's Smith, whether it's Clarkson, whether it's Hood, whoever the case may be. You've got to be able to bring something to the table, and they haven't been able to do that, and Boston has adjusted to that and adjusted very well. Anytime you have Al Horford going 7 or 8 from the field, okay, right, and the only shot is like a 30-footer that he missed in three-point land, yeah, that's saying something.
You know what's remarkable about this, too? And we'll, let's also not leave out the Boston Celtics in this conversation, right, Key? Because we sit here and we pick apart Cleveland because the best player in the world is on that team. And if he doesn't win a game and if his team gets blown out, is sit there and say, oh, what went wrong? What didn't they do? Well, how about let's tip our hat to the Celtics because they're a darn good basketball team. And if, before this series started, you looked at it as you had the ultimate team against the ultimate player. And you don't want to shortchange some of these guys. Let's be honest. If you're looking at it objectively, the Boston Celtics have a better basketball team. They have a tremendous amount more depth than the Cleveland Cavaliers do. It's not even close. Can you imagine if LeBron had to round out his starting 5, guys like Al Horford, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and a Terry Rozier? That team would win a championship.
Does LeBron James handicap the head coaches of teams that he's played on because he's the king, where you got a guy like Brad Stevens who's actually coaching it up? I mean, he's like, not to say that Ty Lue's not an excellent X&O coach, right? But he's not getting the most out of his guys, where Brad Stevens on the flip side of things is getting the most out of his guys, where he doesn't have anywhere near the talent at certain positions as Cleveland.
Well, it's maybe I don't necessarily agree with that, but I hear what you're saying. Look, do I think that Brad Stevens is a better coach than Ty Lue? Yes, absolutely 100%. And maybe if the roles were reversed, if Brad Stevens was coaching the Cavaliers and Ty Lue was coaching the Celtics, would that make Cleveland that much more of a threat? Maybe, perhaps. But let's look at it for a second.
See,
right,
I think it would make him more of a threat if Brad Stevens was coaching
Cleveland. Of course it would.
I think it would make him more because I think he's man got his team in the Eastern Conference Final. The beginning of the year, or middle of the year, you had Kyrie Irving. Beginning of the year, you had my guy that came over from in free agency that got hurt, the Hayward. You had Hayward, right. And so you missed out on Hayward. Then you grabbed Kyrie, you miss out on him, and you still got your team in the Eastern Conference Final.
Take any other
with Tatum as a rookie.
No, and what is he, 19 years old? 19 years old. And that also says a heck of a lot, too, about the development of the player. What about a guy like Jaylen Brown? People aren't talking enough about Jaylen Brown. Now, this is a guy that, remember, when he was picked, what was it, 3rd overall, we scratched our head and said, boy, that was what you took at 3rd, really? And he wasn't great as a rookie. But look at the quantum leap that Jaylen Brown has made from last year to this year. And now you look at this guy and you say, oh, my God, he is a player. And Brad Stevens deserves a lot of the credit to that. He's coaching this guy up. He's worked on the Terry Rozier. What about the revelation that Terry Rozier has been? When Danny Ainge drafted him, they said, really? You took this guy? Now, Al Horford was an all-star player before he got to Boston, but he fits in perfectly with this club. Take the top 2 players off of any team in this journey. Okay, because that's essentially what you did in Boston when you took Kyrie and Gordon Hayward out of the mix. Are they playing in the conference finals? Probably not.
Probably not. And
Probably not.
And Brad Stevens has done all this work and did get not one vote.
And that's insane. And that's insane. I mean, really. But you know what? I don't think he cares. I really don't think he cares.
No, of course not. No, of course not. It's just foolish, though. It's foolish. It's just foolish.
You know what the scary thought is here, too, if you're Cleveland? And again, it's one game. You don't want to make a lot out of it. And we want to hear from you, too, at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Did what happened yesterday in Boston change the way you look at this series? But Boston right now, Key, perfect at home in these playoffs. They're 8-0. By virtue of having home court advantage here, if they just hold serve on their floor in this series, win 3 more home games, they're going to the finals. They're going to the finals. That
is the way it looks. And I know everyone says, well, LeBron's lost before in game 1. He's even been down 0-2 before and came back. This is different now, though. It's a different era, different time. I mean, it's just different. It's a different situation. You can't go back at the past and say, well, I've done it in the past. It doesn't really matter. Because the more confidence that these young Celtics players get and the less confidence that your teammates get, then that's going to be a problem for Cleveland.
I got to be honest with you. Okay, and we've seen this already from them in these playoffs. Not against Toronto last round because we know that, LeBron is in Toronto's heads and that's never going to change, it seems like. But go back to round 1. Remember when Cleveland needed 7 games to beat Indiana? I remember doing shows and sitting there, and I believe this, when Cleveland lost game 3 and they were behind 2-1, I said right there and then that the Cavaliers' season was on the line for that game 4. I felt that if they had lost to Indiana and fell behind 3-1 in that series, it was done. It was turn out the lights. They were not getting out of there alive because I had not seen enough from the supporting cast up until that point to think that they were going to be able to contribute anything to help LeBron get through that first round. They won that game 4. He played out of his mind. The other guys stepped up, and now they're here in the conference final. So I still think that, to me, was a little bit more of a precarious situation for them, even as opposed to being down 1-0 to the Celtics.
But even when you look at the Indiana series, LeBron didn't play nowhere near as bad as, not even close, as bad as he did on Sunday.
He was bad.
He was bad on Sunday, but
against
Indy, he didn't play bad like that at all. So the fact that he played bad in game 1 and so did the other guys is a cause for concern with me. Because now I'm saying to myself, is he just tired of carrying these dudes to the point where it's like, I'm trying to do too much when I need to just take onus up on my own and just do it. And then when he needs them, he tries to utilize them and they can't deliver.
Do you think sometimes a week off is too much of a rest?
I don't know. I've never played basketball.
No, but I'm just saying, I mean, could maybe have rust kicked in? Because, Cleveland's been off forever. I mean, it seems like they last took the floor about a month ago because they made quick work of Toronto. Maybe the rust factor kicked in. I don't know. They better come out with a little bit more of a spring in their step game 2.
You would think with older legs, with LeBron, LeBron, Love, Smith, those guys that are a little bit older, that they would have wanted to get some rest and rejuvenate and come back with more spring. So I don't think, no, not at all. It was only off 5 days. That's not all that much.
The thing that has to
and they actually practiced, and I'm sure they worked out and ran and stuff.
The thing that has to turn around more than anything else here, when you look at one department for Cleveland, you got to do a better job knocking them down from beyond the arc. I mean, they were just putrid yesterday. They missed their first 14 for crying out loud. Think about that. They didn't make a three-pointer till the second half of the game. This is the NBA 2018. If you're not knocking them down from beyond the arc, you're not going to win.
Could it have been nerves? I mean, I don't know. I don't have an answer for why their shots were not falling. Clearly, They were well, not all of them were uncontested, but the majority of them were uncontested, good looks, open looks. So clearly they didn't worry about you knocking them down to the degree that they needed to make an adjustment because you were going to self-check yourself.
And give the Celtics credit for not allowing LeBron to get into the paint, because a lot of the shots that he misfired from yesterday, they were outside shots. He was 0 for 5 from downtown. That is his one vulnerability, his outside game. He's gotten better over the years. Don't get me wrong.
Well, that goes to say what I was saying, that instead of true double teaming him, you got whoever's going to guard him on him, and you got somebody shading for the weak side help if they need to. And as he starts to try and penetrate, drive, get his butt underneath the rim, now you can collapse him, make him kick it back out. And if they hit it, hit it. If they don't, chances are you're going to win the game, and they were not hitting it. So you take that same philosophy and you roll that right back in the game, too.
888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. We'll get to the Western Conference as well, but we want to hear from you. Let's start it off with Michael in Virginia. Michael, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Yeah, guys, how you doing?
Good,
What's
Mike.
up?
Man, you guys are getting caught up in the moment because just now Indiana's waking up from the LeBron tsunami. It's one game. Indiana put a whooping on them. Where are they at? They're home. Same thing's going to happen to Boston. Game 1 really doesn't matter. Game 2, watch what happens. LeBron's going to come out smoking.
Well, I would say this. The further you go in the playoffs, the more pressure it is. That's all I know.
And Boston is 10 times the team that Indiana is, for crying out loud.
Well, when that pressure comes, because this is essentially a point where you are one step from getting to the championship. You were 2 steps when you played Indiana. You 1 step from getting to the championship now. So there's more pressure. Yeah, they lost to Indy in game 1. LeBron came back out and was hitting on all cylinders and all that. So everybody, and then they swept Toronto. So everybody expect for him to go back to this heroic LeBron James in game 2 and get it even at 1-1. And that may not necessarily be the case. And if it's not the case, then a lot of people that think that that's what LeBron is going to be able to do is going to feel real bad when they placing them bets.
Right. And we're not ruling anything out. As we said, it is just one game, and we've seen him dig out from deficits before. But this Celtics team is the real deal. And if you haven't given them your proper attention yet, you better start, because this is a very, very good basketball team. Tommy in Ohio is up next. What's up, Tommy?
Hello. I just wanted to ask your guys an opinion on 2 questions. I want to say that LeBron has never wanted to work with young guys, and he's never wanted to coach like Brad Stevens. It's a pleasure talking to you guys. I'll listen to your answer then.
He's never wanted a coach. Well, let me ask you a question. When has he had the opportunity to have a coach like Brad Stevens? And what is a coach like Brad Stevens? I don't think he ever wanted the opportunity to have like a coach like Brad Stevens.
You talking about LeBron?
Yes.
I think Spoelstra's a pretty good coach. I think Spoelstra's pretty good.
Spoelstra's a very good coach.
Yeah.
Maybe he didn't have any championships until LeBron got there, but he stuck it out with Spo.
Phil Jackson didn't have any till Michael Jordan came.
Exactly.
And Phil Jackson didn't win any more until he got Kobe Bryant. So,
remember when LeBron, and Tommy, thank you for the phone call. When LeBron went down to Miami, there was always this, how is he going to coexist with Spoelstra? Remember they got off to that rough start, and you had that one episode when LeBron was going back to the bench for a timeout and he bumped shoulders with Spoelstra, and people were trying to make such a big deal about that. The reason LeBron, and LeBron's a smart guy, the reason LeBron knew not to, even if he didn't like Spoelstra, he wasn't going to win that battle, because you know who likes Spoelstra? Pat Riley. And he had Pat Riley down there, so LeBron knew that he was not going to be able to exert any sort of authority to pull the power play in that one. And Spoelstra's a damn good coach, let's be honest.
No, yeah, that's why I'm saying when he says he's never wanted a coach like LeBron, like Brad Stevens, or had a coach like Brad Stevens, that's not true.
Right.
That's not true at all.
And look, he gets the perception more than anything else for the way David Blatt was run out of here. And to say that LeBron had an influence on that, of course we could. He could deny it till the cows come home.
Yeah, but David Blatt took on the situation that he wasn't even signed up for. He didn't sign up for LeBron.
When LeBron was there, correct.
No, he didn't sign up for that. Remember, he signed up and LeBron came.
Right.
So it was a totally different situation.
And people gave Ty Lue a tremendous amount of credit, maybe more than he even deserves, for when Cleveland won that championship. But now all of a sudden, remember, they're sitting there saying, well, how much longer is Ty Lue going to coach the team?
Well, you got
to
give a head coach some credit, because if you give Steve Kerr all his credit with the guys that he have in the Hampton Five, you certainly got to give championship caliber coaches their credit. Rudy Tomjanovich, whoever, they all get their credit because they coach the team, whether they're really drawing up the plays or not.
But you're only going to be as good as the talent you have.
That's in every single sport. Look at the Dodgers. The Dodgers can't get out of their own way right now because everybody's banged up. They got major problems.
They got major problems. But, and you talk about any coach. A great coach is only as good as the great players that he has. That's the bottom line. We'll do more on this.
More coaches need to understand that thing because it ain't always about the X's and the O's as much as it is the Willies and the Joes.
Mm-hmm. Need a Willie, need a Joe for sure. We'll get into the Western Conference Finals as well. Dan Graca, Keyshawn, Johsnson, and for Stephen A. We go to the top of the hour here on ESPN Radio.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I feel like a whole new person.
Disclaimer, you will not become a whole new person. This is impossible. You might be able to join a gym or diet program, buy a new wardrobe, get hair implants, but your DNA and physical form will remain the same. Geico waives any and all liability if you attempt to become a new person, except a cyborg. If you choose to become a half-human, half-cybernetic organism with lasers for eyes, the Geico legal team would be cool with that, because, quote, laser eyes are pretty sweet. Pew, 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 end quote.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca, Keyshawn, Johnsson, and for Stephen A. We're going to the top of the hour here on ESPN Radio. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. You can tweet at us at Dan Graca and at Keyshawn. To win in basketball, you got to play great coverage, right? And with Straight Talk Wireless, you're getting great coverage because they use the exact same 4G LTE towers as the big carriers, but for a lot less. Straight Talk Wireless, only at Walmart. Refer to terms and conditions of service at straighttalk.com. And the NBA Western Conference Finals are on ESPN Radio. Tune in for Game 1 tonight as Harden and the Rockets host KD and the Warriors. Presented by Indeed. Coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern on most ESPN radio stations. And Key, we talked about the Eastern Conference. We'll get back to those calls in a second here, but got to turn our attention now to the West. And I don't think it's crazy to suggest, all right, and this is no disrespect at all to Boston or to Cleveland, but I think that there is a large enough segment of the basketball viewing public which is under the impression that this Western Conference Finals is almost the de facto NBA Finals. Agree or disagree?
I disagree because Boston matches up well with Golden State. They've actually, if you go back and you look, and I'm talking about this sort of, not necessarily Boston's crew, but some of the guys that's been on Boston's team, they've actually given Golden State some run for their money, pre and post Kevin Durant. So I wouldn't necessarily just rule out the Boston Celtics if they were to advance along with Golden State to the championship.
I hear what you're saying, and I know.
And I know we fall in love with the sexy. There's no question about it.
Right.
We fall in love with the sexy. We like all the snapshots, and we like all the names and the Hampton Five and the Draymonds and all the hype. We like that. There's no question about it. But I wouldn't rule out them giving them a run for their money.
It's interesting how you say Boston and not even Cleveland. Think about that, though, and I think you're right. I think you're 100% right that if you were going to take a team from the East and you're going to put them in the finals and say which one is better equipped to slow down one of those teams out west, it's probably Boston and not even the team with the best player on it.
That's true. I think Boston...
They're a better team.
Boston's a better team. There's no question. So when you look at Draymond Green up against Kevin Love, come on, man. I mean, that doesn't even... He's going to take his heart again, so I don't even...
Take his heart.
Again. He did it already. So when I look at that, I'm like, well, that's not a real answer. And obviously LeBron is LeBron, and they got their work cut out for him. But when you're Golden State, you got to guard... when you're Boston or Cleveland, you got to guard 4 guys and sometimes 5 that just is poison. When KD's not on, you got Curry. Curry and KD off, and Klay starts to step up, you got Klay. Or if Curry's off and KD's on, you got Klay. Then Iguodala. Then all of a sudden you mix in a little Draymond defensively, and then he starts to pop his little floaters here and there. It's just a lot that goes on.
The difference that I see in this series versus the way the Eastern Conference Finals is set up. We talked about, and clearly I think what's going to make or break Cleveland's chances of moving on in the East, as I said, is the supporting cast has to show up, right? Those guys have to be there to help LeBron James. I don't think you say that for the Western Conference. Forget about the X factors when you look at the Rockets and the Warriors. Key to me, this is going to come down to the superstars. Each team is littered with them. The stars are going to be the ones that decide this series. I really believe that.
I think it is, but it's Chris Paul,
who, by the way, has never been this far. Let's see him on this stage, right? Never been in a conference final.
See, to me, I don't even look at it like that.
You don't?
I don't look at
But it bears watching.
Because everybody, a lot of players have got to go through the conference final to get to the championship. Then the next thing will be, well, he's never been to a championship before. Okay, well, neither did Joe Montana, neither did Magic Johnson till they got there, right? I mean, it's the truth.
But not this late in their careers, though. That's what's interesting about the Chris Paul development.
I get it. I get it, but Michael Jordan didn't get there till he got there. And when he finally got there, he was able to win. So I wouldn't just discount the fact that he's never been to a conference final, because remember, he never got to game. I mean, never got out of the second round. Then he gets out of the second round. Never, it's every series is going to be something.
But you know that's fairly or unfairly, especially the great players, you're judged on what you do in the playoffs. Because what was the argument? I mean, look at the argument that people throw out now whenever you want to bring up the never-ending LeBron versus Jordan. Well, one of the knocks on LeBron is he's stubbed his toe multiple times in the finals. You know, everybody relates to the postseason and what you do. And not to say that Chris Paul is not a Hall of Famer, and not that he's been one of the best point guards of this generation, but but always with Chris Paul was he's never been past the second round. Well, now he is. So let's see. This is a good opportunity to kind of add to his resume a little bit.
It is a good opportunity, and I think he will be the X factor. If he can have a game like he had the other night, 41, then Golden State's going to be in a run for their money.
The guy who has really risen to the forefront here for the Rockets, I think it's obvious, is Clint Capella, right? I mean, he's a guy that the maturation and the growth that he has shown over the years, and now to the point where I guess you almost have to consider him that third wheel, right? I mean, he is a legitimate third option when you talk about these big threes for all these super teams in the NBA. Chris Paul, James Harden, any way you want to arrange them. And then now you have Clint Capella to add to the fold, so the Rockets are a little bit more equipped to fight fire with Golden State. And Key, let's remember something else. When you looked at Boston, like when you began this conversation and you said the Celtics were pretty equipped here to be able to slow down some of those guys for Golden State, great. That's how they want to approach beating the team that has a lot of firepower. Daryl Morey and the Houston Rockets, they've made no bones about it. They've come out and said, shoot, we can't try to stop the Warriors. We have to beat them at their own game. And so if you're Houston, you are built to outscore the Rockets. Take the over in this series, if you know what I mean.
No, and that's very true. I think but see, another thing, you can't get caught up in the front office, because the front office will have you messed up if you listening to them. You know, the players know what they got to do. They've beaten them, obviously, 2 out of the 3 times that they played them, but there was guys that were hurt, that were in and out of the lineup on both sides. They're not chasing the Rockets. The Rockets are chasing them no matter what they say. They like, as
they should.
It's just another game for them. That's the way they have to approach it. It's another game, another team with a different color jersey. And if they approach it that way, then they'll have an opportunity to beat them. And I'm talking about from a Rockets standpoint. The Rockets can't look at it and be like, oh, I'm going after Golden State. It's another team with another color jersey on. I got to play them like I play everybody else. My best.
They're going to have to, I think, doing it by winning an old-fashioned shootout. I can't see them stopping Golden State and putting the clamps on them on the defensive end of the floor. I just think they're going to have to outscore them. I mean, it goes without saying they're going to have to outscore them, but you know what I mean. This is going to have to be, you know what, let's play an old-fashioned playground game. Get up and down the floor as much as possible. Let three-pointers rain. That's what this series is going to be decided upon.
Yeah, but when you get into trying to battle against teams and do what they do and not stick to your game plan, that's when you get yourself in trouble. Because you remember Harden a year ago, he got knocked out. He was the guy who was supposed to lead Houston into the conference final. He never made it.
Disappeared.
So you got that little bit on it too. So you got to watch that in this game. What's he going to look like this deep into a run in the playoffs? He hasn't been this deep since he was at OKC, I believe.
You're right. And you think, and he was at the NBA Finals and he pulled a disappearing act. And you know, it's funny, you brought up OKC, and maybe this isn't the conversation for today, but that is going to be one of the great look backs when you look at sports, maybe in the next 15, 20 years, that we're going to look back one day on the Oklahoma City Thunder and how they were constituted at one point. Yes, they got to a finals, but they were all babies. You're going to look back on that team who had KD, Westbrook, and James Harden for a how many years stretch it was or whatever, and they couldn't win a championship. You talk about a giant what if. That's going to be one of the great what ifs maybe in sports.
Yeah, but were they ready at that time to win a championship? Were they ready? If I took those three right now,
obviously
and I put
not. No.
But if I took those three right now and I put them on the team back together, and we just rewind, and I take Harden and I take KD and I put Russell on the team without Perkins, forget it. There's no Perkins, and I give them that right now, whatever OKC has on the bench or whatever the case may be.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they win a championship then?
You'd have to think they would.
You would have to think they would. They're older, they're more mature.
Even though there's one ball.
It.
There's only one ball, and that's the problem. You have to learn how to play off of each other. Like, you have all these great sharpshooters. Well, they're not all going to average 30 a game. It doesn't work that way. But I think the guy who obviously took his game to that next level, when you look at that three, was Harden. Nobody knew that James Harden, when he was coming off the bench for Oklahoma City, was going to morph into an MVP player, which he clearly has.
I just thought he was a guy.
Yeah, he was a guy.
I just figured, I was like, oh, he cool, he good. But yeah. I didn't think he would turn into one of the top 4 players in the NBA.
What was he, like the 3rd pick in the draft? But still, I don't think anybody envisioned that he would be, as you said, one of the best players in the league. No way. He would never approach Durant's status. And, even at that time, Westbrook was still morphing into an MVP player in the early stages of that. But, hey, he's right up there alongside it, and you got plenty of star power when you're looking at the series. We'll hear from you. We'll continue to talk about it as well at 888-SAY-ESPN, 888-729-3776. Dan Graca, Keyshawn, Johsnson. We're going till the top of the hour on ESPN Radio.
Guess what? You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca, Keyshawn, Johsnson, and for Stephen A. Smith, we're taking it till the top of the hour. 888-SAY-ESPN. That's 888-729-3776. Life's special events call for a beautiful bouquet from 1-800-Flowers.com. Right now, when you order a dozen Gerbera daisies starting at $29.99, you'll also get a free vase. For details, go to 1-800-Flowers.com/ESPN and get the feeling of being rewarded with gold status at Shell with the Fuel Rewards program. Download the Fuel Rewards app. Join and start saving 5 cents a gallon today. We'll also be in for Stephen A. tomorrow as well, so we will look back on a game number 1 in the Western Conference Finals, which can be heard tonight on ESPN Radio with the Warriors and the Rockets. And Key, I know maybe it's a little much, but I really believe this only because I have a tremendous amount of respect for the Golden State Warriors. How can you not, with everything they've accomplished over the last few years? I really and truly believe that if the Rockets are going to win this series, they have to win not one, but the first 2 games on their home floor to go up 2-0.
Yeah, they can't afford to be down 2-0. I don't even think that they can afford to split. It's different, man. It's different when you get into this situation when you've been there before, like the Golden State Warriors have, or you haven't been there. There's only one guy that I can think of that plays for Houston, and that's Trevor Ariza. Many moons ago with the Lakers, he got there. But, James Harden got there, obviously, and lost, which is not winning. But as a group, they've yet to be there. This Golden State team has been there 3 straight years, potentially now going on 4. So there's a lot of momentum on their side. They understand, hey, if we get down by 8, there's no panic. We get down by 15, there's no panic because they've been in this situation in this moment before. So I don't really necessarily – I got Golden State winning in 5, but that's just me.
I have my head says 5. My heart wants to say 6, though, just because I want a little length to these series.
You would say you're a Jet fan. Your heart says a lot.
Hey, what does that mean from a guy who used to wear the uniform?
It just means that you got a lot of hope. That's all.
Do I have results?
You might wind up getting some in the future.
Sam the man. We put all our stock in now. Let's say hi to Victor in Long Beach. Victor, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, how you guys doing? Keyshawn, how you doing?
What's happening, boss?
Man, diehard SC fan. You know you one of the GOATs, right?
Well, I try to be.
No, but what I did want to chime in on was the Rockets and Warriors series. It's so interesting. Daryl Morey, love him as a GM. Between him and Danny Ainge, you can go either or as far as the top GM in the league right now. But when he said himself specifically that the roster that they've created was basically just for the Warriors, I can agree with it to a certain extent. I mean, picking up P.J. Tucker and picking up Gerald Green, picking up Chris Paul, they just picked up so many pieces, these 3 and D wings, you know, these role players that they feel like can match up with a Klay Thompson, can match up with a Curry, can match up with a Durant. But it's an oxymoron even saying that. Two of them are just unguardable. Curry has a bad game here and there, but Durant, we just know he's just the most unguardable player on the planet. You can be 6'10", 6'11", so you're not blocking his shot. I just don't know from a realistic standpoint if the Rockets can even get one. And I agree totally with Keyshawn. They can't walk out of Houston splitting. They need to be up 2-0 because when they come to Oracle Arena, they don't lose there. I mean, we're talking about a team, was it last year or 2 years ago, they only lost one home game all year. And this is to get back to the finals, the reigning, defending NBA champs. I don't know. I just don't see them doing it, Keith.
Well, that's what bottom line, you said it all right there. And the difference is also when you look at these two teams, Key, if the stars on Houston, we were talking Harden or Paul, if one of them has an off night, all right, you have a couple of other nice pieces there to be able to pick up the slack. But Golden State, you are asking a lot. If one of those guys, let's say Curry, Klay, KD, if they're off their game, you got so many guys to be able to pick up the slack, and that's why they're so difficult to beat.
Who's going to guard Klay?
In this series?
Yeah. You going to put Harden on him?
I could put Ariza on him.
Okay, so you taking now who's Harden going to guard?
It's like pick your poison. That's what it is.
So if you put Harden on Klay and Klay decides, I'm going to move around a little bit tonight, now you're going to take a lot of energy on the offensive end away from Harden.
Oh, for sure. Well,
now you want CP3 to guard who?
And that's the problem with Capella. And we talked him up pretty good. But if Golden State goes small, Capella gets lost on the defensive end because then they're going to bring him out from the basket. And then he gets lost on the perimeter. So it is a matchup nightmare still that this team presents, unfortunately, and we'll see how it all plans out tonight. Key, this was a blast. Let's do it again tomorrow. Thanks to everybody who contributed. It's Dan Graca and Keyshawn Johnsson saying so long on ESPN Radio.
Yep.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and the ESPN app.